I cannot wait for today's episode of Burnout to Brilliance because we have Jessica from the Fioneers on today. Now, the thing that you're going to love about Jessica is she is going to talk little bit about being a location independent entrepreneur because I think that is the epitome of a freedom-based business. And whether you're just here for the personal development, whether you're here for the story, or whether you want to hear just about Jessica's story and how she found her way, regardless of what you're here for, I know you're going to get something out of it. So, without further ado, I want to introduce you to Jessica. Hi, Jessica.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited for today's chat. So Jessica and I actually connected over Threads and then Instagram, and we have a lot of the same values. So you guys are going to love today's episode. So, Jessica, when we do our guest episodes, we always follow the 4R formula that I use in a lot of my programs. So the first R is about reflect. So can you reflect on yourself and give us a bit of your bio and tell us, for those who don't know who you are or aren't familiar with the Fioneers, about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I would say, an outdoor adventurer. And I live in the mountains and I'm a part-time van lifer. So when you talk about location independent entrepreneurship, that for me involves traveling for 4 to 6 months out of the year and then living in the location of my choice, which is in the mountains. And then I'm a wife, I'm a dog mom, child-free by choice. I am a sourdough enthusiast, and I am a coach, writer, and speaker, and co-founder of the Fioneers. And the Fioneers is a platform through our blog, YouTube channel, coaching, courses, and retreats. We help people build financial freedom and then use it to design a life that they truly love.
Amazing, amazing. And obviously, I love that myself because I'm always trying to help people get clear about what they want out of life and build a business and a career that supports that. And so we're totally aligned because I think that's the thing is that when you build a business or career that supports your life, of course, you're not going to have all the mental health issues that you would have working in a capitalistic 9 to 5 where you feel like you never have time, you never get outdoors,
Mhm.
massive for mental health, and you just don't get to live the life that you want. But it takes a big jump. And so I'm curious too, and we'll get into this, but do you find a lot of your clients, there is a little bit of skepticism because I find it with mine sometimes of like, is this
Mhm.
real? Like, do people actually do this? Because we're so conditioned that the only way to make money is to work in corporate, or that
Mhm.
if you're doing something different, you must be a scammer. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I'm not sure I'm sure I do get there are people who like hear the story and hear about the things that we do and are wondering that. But I vividly remember the moment where I like learned about building financial freedom and designing a life that I love and how there were people who were actually living their lives differently. And I remember that moment of being like, is this real? Do people actually do this? And so I imagine that most people probably go through that process as they're starting to understand that that people can design lives that are unconventional and that if you're going against the sort of norms of society or what your parents and teachers and, all of those people in your life have told you you should do, um, that when your eyes are open to a new opportunity, it's natural to say, is this real? Are there people actually doing this? And then I think it's important to dig deeper to then say, who are these people and how are they actually doing this? To then, and then the thing that I have found is as I've gotten to know those people, right? Anyone who's living their life in an unconventional way. Before I know them, I tend to look at their life and think they must be so much different than me. And then when I get to know who they are and their motivations and their challenges and the fact that they also deal with imposter syndrome, right? I realize like, wow, these people are just like me, and I am not so very different from them. I can do this too.
Oh, and I love that. I love that because I've been privileged enough with my private practice where I get to see behind the scenes of people's lives. Like I chose a career as a therapist, I get to see behind the scenes. And I have worked with people from all walks of life. As you can imagine, I've worked in community mental health and government mental health. And then I've also worked with CEOs and entrepreneurs and, you know, people in media and celebrities even. And everyone has the same issues. It's just in different manifestations or formats. But like you're saying, everybody has doubt. Everybody has imposter syndrome. Everybody wins and loses and, still has to show up for their kids or their family or has pressures from people or judgment from people and have to let friends go. Like we all go through it. It's just that we don't all share that journey. And so I think we look at someone and go, wow, they've got their shit together when actually they're going through the exact same
Mhm.
stuff, if not worse than you. They're just not putting it out there. So
Mhm.
I love that you're sharing
Yep.
that too. I think that's an important conversation. So
Mhm.
let's get into your story. So the second R is that redefining thing or moment or word. So for you, can I ask what led you on this journey and what was a redefining moment that's really changed your life?
Yeah, so for me, the this moment, right, that my in some ways it's like my life is divided into before and after this particular thing. And in 2018, I started experiencing really severe anxiety and panic attacks um, to the point where I was unable to work. I was unable to go to work. I was unable to open my work computer without having a panic attack. I'd get a phone call, and if I didn't know who it was on the other end, I would like have a panic attack. Right? It in and in many ways it hit at once, but it was something that had been building up over years. And I almost use the analogy of like in my brain, it was like this dam that was holding back all of the stress and the anxiety. And at a certain point, that dam just like started to crack. And then in that moment on, I think it was July 12th of 2018, that dam just cracked. And I woke up having a really severe, like 3 to 4 hour panic attack that I just like could not get out of. I like got my husband and he sat with me and finally got the breathing under control and realized like I could not go to back to work. And at the time I assumed like I'm going to need a couple days off. And then it quickly became clear that I wasn't going to be able to go back for, a week, a month, right? And it turned into being about 6 months off, completely off of work, before I was ready to figure out what was next.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that because I think obviously I talk a lot about burnout on this podcast, but I also talk a lot about anxiety. I myself have struggled with
Mhm.
anxiety my whole life, and underneath that is the trauma of what's driving that anxiety, childhood stuff and personal experiences and, negative core beliefs and things. And I think it presents differently for everyone. And so I guess if I can ask a little bit, what do you think at the time was driving that anxiety and the panic attacks? Like, what was it
Mhm.
about your work? Was it bad co-workers? Was it just the daily hustle? What kind of things do you think contributed to it being at a head? And why do you think you had to wait till it got so severe? Because usually there's like flags along the
Mhm.
way that we ignore. Why do you think you ignored all those flags too?
Yeah, those are great questions. So, yeah, I've done a lot of thinking about this over the years. And I think the thing that led to it was, in some ways, there was a really high level of stress. I was working in a really high stress, fast paced environment. I was working 50 to 60-hour weeks. Felt like nothing that I could ever do was ever good enough. Um, and it's interesting because about 6 months before I had this mental breakdown, I had been like going after a promotion. And I had been told that I needed to manage my workload more independently, and then maybe I would be ready for the promotion.
Yeah.
Um, and that was code for don't push back. Like, don't set boundaries. Don't say this is unrealistic. And it's interesting because at that time, and we'll get to this, but I was so motivated to get that promotion and get that higher salary, that I just, sort of like put the blinders on and I put my head down and I was like, okay, I'm going to get this promotion. I'm going to play by their rules and I'm going to see what happens. Right. And I didn't make any waves. I didn't set any boundaries. I did all of the things that were expected of me, right, over that 6 month period of time. And then what do you know? I got the promotion. And then 2 weeks later, I had the mental health crisis. And and thinking back to it, like that was a very unhealthy way to go about getting a promotion and probably a really unhealthy work environment that I could have gotten out of a lot earlier. Um, I think for me, the background of that comes from I have a lot of grit. And I will persevere through any challenge. Right. And I just remember when I was a kid, I played softball and I was a pitcher. And I went to this like softball camp one year that was like positive mental attitude softball camp. Right? Like I'm like a 13-year-old kid just learning about like I have to control my emotions and I have to, be positive and I like it's mind over matter kind of thing. Like that's what the focus of this was when your whole team is depending on you. And so that perspective really stayed with me for a long time. And it didn't just happen in the work setting. I would run or play sports until I was injured because I thought it was mind over matter. And I would work until I got completely burned out because I thought that I should be able to like control my emotions in the situation and that I was the issue versus the situation being the issue. And that's obviously what I see it as now, as the situation was the issue. And I absolutely could have and wish that I had gotten myself out of that situation earlier. Um, but I think needed to go through that in order to realize all of these, I don't know, all of these myths that I was believing.
Yeah, and your story is so common. And I put a post up recently on my Instagram about, a haunted house, but it's a coach that says we all have the same 24 hours as Beyonce. Like those things
Yeah.
and the Dave Goggins mindset, right? Of like just push through no matter
Mhm.
what. And it's so interesting because I work with a lot of high performance women. A lot of them, when they first start working with me and they tell me their situation. So if you were coming to me, Jessica, and you're like, oh, Sheena, like I work 50 to 60 hours, I'm going for this promotion, I'm doing whatever it takes. if I said to you, you know, anyone would feel stressed and anxious if they live the life that you live. It, it can be confronting because a lot of clients want to go, what can I do to fix this? What skills can I have to
Mhm.
manage this? And it's like, you can't. You actually can't. And I think there's this idea that
Mhm.
I can just be chill in a high performance workplace where I'm working 60 hours a week. It is so unnatural to the human beingness of how we've evolved. If somebody has quote unquote good mental health in that atmosphere, we're actually concerned because you're actually not living in alignment with human beingness. So people who can function
Mhm.
in such high performance things like that without experiencing anxiety or burnout at some point, that's actually more concerning than people who go, actually, I'm reaching my limit. Because you can't, those sorts of,
Mhm.
I try to tell people, it's like, let's say you have a 12-week deadline. Like, let's say you guys are launching a retreat or a new course or something like that, and you go, look, we've got a lot of stuff we've got to get done. It's okay to have those bigger weeks, those bigger months, knowing there's a deadline coming, knowing that this isn't the
Mhm.
job. It's just that during this project or this period, this is it. And then we're going to plan a break and recover and get back to a normal routine. But there's a lot of industries that doesn't happen. The expectation is you just do this. And I think that's the difference here is that people need to realize that that is
Mhm.
not sustainable in any kind of way. So,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
thank you for sharing that because I think that brings that point up too. So you had all of that. You had these severe anxiety and panic attacks and just this kind of epiphany moment of like, I cannot go back to work. How did you rebuild after that? Because I again, it feels like you're not functional. It's like even just doing the basics of, getting the dishes out of the dishwasher and cleaning a kitchen. It's like, how am I supposed to do anything else when I feel like I can't even do the basics or everyday life is hard? What did you do to redesign your life and start to pivot into the beautiful direction that you're on now?
Mhm. So the first step of what I needed to do was really just spend some time resting and recovering. And so I was working with a therapist at the time who was incredibly helpful. And, she helped me figure out like what are the activities that are truly recovery focused for me
Mm,
and encouraged me that I could just spend all of my time taking walks, napping, going for swims, reading books, like doing things for me. And so I had a few weeks, probably close to a month, that was just focused on recovery activities and then also reflection. So journaling, going to therapy, and those sorts of things. Um, from there, one thing that was really helpful for me was I participated in a dialectic behavioral therapy group program, which was really, really helpful because I think as we were talking about the pushing the negative emotions away and like the mind over matter kind of thing, the dialectic behavioral therapy was really helpful because it helped me see all emotions are useful, right? I don't need to push those negative emotions away, that every emotion is useful and it's telling me something. And so what is it telling me? And so that was incredibly helpful and a really clear mindset shift that happened for me right away. And then one thing that I learned about in that was the difference between fear and anxiety. And as part of that, one of the things that they teach in the DBT program is that in some ways anxiety is really a sub emotion to fear, but it's fear when it doesn't fit the facts of the situation. When you're feeling the feelings of fear, but you don't actually have anything that you need to be afraid of.
mhm.
And so that was really helpful for me to then start to identify, okay, I'm having these feelings of anxiety and panic. Does it fit the facts of the situation? Um, and if not, how can I work through that, right? To sort of get myself to a place where I can move forward. And also to recognize that when I'm experiencing, sometimes I was experiencing what I thought was anxiety or panic, that but it actually fit the facts of the situation. So like when I was thinking about work, like work was ruining my mental health. That was actually more akin to a fear response that was telling me get out of this situation. Right. And I didn't do it. And so my body did it for me. And so that was incredibly helpful to start learning about those things. And that in many ways was really the first step, right? To even get me to a point where I was able to start to focus on what could life look like from here, right? I was sort of just getting back to what is a good baseline. And then from there, there were a couple of key insights. So I started to learn a lot about personal finances and building financial freedom. And, prior to this point, I had always just assumed, like, hopefully I could retire someday, and hopefully I am in a career that, for the next 40 years that I don't hate. Like that's just sort of what I assumed was the path. And then I started to learn about like there are all of these people who are choosing to live their lives differently, and part of what's allowing them to do that is they're building up this financial freedom and they're building their own safety nets that allow them to take risks and do the things that they want to do. And so during this time, I originally, heard about this idea of early retirement, which wasn't particularly exciting for me. Right? I mean, I was thinking like, oh, that would be cool for like 6 months or a year, but then I really want to be doing something productive that's like helping the world. So then why push, right? And try to save like all of my money so that I could, and be miserable until that point, which is sort
Mm.
of the story of what people were doing. Um, so then I started to ask, how can I actually start to use my money to support me to live the life that I want? And so I sought out people who were doing that. So who were saying, I'm going to choose to work part-time, or I'm going to choose to go freelance, or I'm going to build my own business, or I'm going to take a mini retirement. I'm going to take 6 months to a year off of work to have these experiences that I want in my life. Those were the people that really opened my eyes to like you can live your life differently. And what you really need to just create your own safety net, your own financial safety net to be able to do that. And so through learning about all of that, I realized, that maybe I didn't have to go back to work full time. Maybe I could go back to work part time, even if it was for a period of time. And so I eventually then went back to work part time in sort of a bridge job, I would call it, as I was figuring out what I wanted to be doing long term. And then I heard about this concept that was really empowering called Coast Financial Independence. And the idea behind that is that depending on your age and how long you have until retirement, you can invest a certain amount of money and then let that money just grow in the background to provide you with what you need later in life. And the younger you are, the smaller amount of money that actually is. And so we calculated this number for ourselves. At 31, when I had my mental health crisis, and realized, like, hey, we are already at that point. So we had been focusing on, increasing our income and putting away savings and investments. And so, realizing then at that point, when you reach Coast Fi, then all you need to do is cover your actual costs,
Mhm.
because the money you've already saved and put away will grow. And so that gave me this feeling of freedom to say, well, maybe I never have to work full time ever again if I don't want to. I could work part time, right? And then, and so I worked part time in this bridge job, and then started having more energy. And so then I was like, what do I want to do with this excess mental energy? I don't need to increase my hours. Like, what if I could build a business doing something that I absolutely love, that I would do regardless of whether I generated income doing it, anyways, and sort of went on a quest to figure out what that would look like. So yeah, so
Mhm. That
I'll
was
let you jump in.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, that was amazing. I love hearing that. And I think something that, if I can reflect back, I think is really, really important for anybody listening, and even for myself at times. And for people who've been listening for a while, I tend to combine spirituality and psychology. I'm a bit of a woo girl like that, where, I believe in those things. But I do think if you're in a not so good space, like you were saying, after your mental health crisis or your sort of epiphany, like the message that the anxiety and the panic was delivering, it's very natural for us as human beings, again, that fear-based response to jump into action. I need to do something about this. What's my next move? I need to plan something. I need to get another job. I need to just take action. But often, what you find is that when you take action from an unclear, fear-based place, things sometimes get even worse because you're not
Mm.
coming from an aligned place, a reflected place.
Yeah.
And I love that you talked about, okay, I didn't just take 2 weeks off and then take action. I took 6 months. I think that's the thing is that, I'm sure you'd agree with this, Jessica, is I'm finding it quite frustrating in the online space of people who are like, how I went from zero to $1 million in 3 minutes, kind of business coaching out there. And it's actually, if you're going to build a business that's going to be a legacy, that's going to serve you for the rest of your life, it might take 5 years. It might take 3 years. Because even for
Hmm.
myself, the
Yep.
business I had 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago is very different to what I have now because I needed to try and then go, I don't like this. I like this. I want to bring more of myself here. I was holding back. Like, it's personal development and pivoting and going,
Mhm.
I love working with this kind of person, but not so much this kind of person. And you don't know until you're doing. So I just love that you're talking about there was a timeline here. And I
Mhm.
needed to take time because I think so
Mhm.
many people are just like, yeah, just take action, push through, grit. I think the biggest grit is going, I know what my dream is, but I know I need to take time off to get there because it is
Mm.
all we want to
Yep.
do is go, whatever it takes. And sometimes whatever it takes is taking time off to get clear, right? Because,
Mhm. Yep.
I'm thinking of a client right now, a beautiful client I have, who I'm really trying to pull back from taking action because the business isn't coming together how she wants. The money's not flowing. And she's going sort of all over the place, but she's forgetting that we're trying to build this so she can be available for her kids, but it's not going that way, right? And so it's just this feeling of I've got to take
Mhm.
action and just neglecting everything again. And it's like, why do that? You're just going to end up in the situation that started all of this.
Mhm.
So I really
Yep.
appreciate that. And so, and I love what you're saying is that I think it's important to recognize that financial freedom can come, like you're saying, from investments. It can come from real estate. It can come from
Mhm.
businesses. Like, there's no one way. The one way is what's going to work for you and your lifestyle and your skills and your personality. Because I think, again, there's a lot of people in the online space who are like, it's my way or the highway. So I love that you're bringing up that
Mhm.
more than one way to skin a cat. Obviously, sorry for my vegan friends, but the same, right? So, so I'd love to
Mhm.
hear you went through this epiphany, then you're like, how I'm creating this amazing life and all of that. How do you stay on track with that? Because I know as a business
Mm.
owner, my income goes up and down. And when it's going up, totally easy to stay on track. When it's not going in that direction, it can be really easy to fall back into old habits, old patterns, old ways of thinking. So, what do you do now to stay on track and to help both yourself and your clients?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So one is I do sort of continually think through this like lifestyle design approach, in which for me, that means there's sort of this three-step design process, which is what do I really want? What are the elements of my ideal life? Then dreaming big, and then moving from ideas to action through experimentation. And so taking small actions to learn about the things that we're interested in exploring, and then evaluating them, reflecting on them, and figuring out what that next step is. And that process, I think, just continues on and on. And so I always try to situate myself within that lifestyle design process, and take that approach and mindset that everything that I'm doing is helping me refine who am I and what do I want, right? Every action that I take is helping me dream bigger, because I'm building my confidence. And then I dream bigger and then figure out how I want to experiment with that new idea. So there's that piece of it. And then on the more tactical side, I think there's three really important pieces that allow me to stay on track. One is I do this annual clarity process, every year. So at the end of the year, I'm reflecting on the year that just passed. I'm thinking through like, what do I really want? What is my life vision in, all of the different areas of life? What are the gaps between that life vision and the life that I currently have right now? And what do I want to focus on over the next year to close those gaps? And then create my annual plan based on how am I going to close those gaps to get, where I want to be in closer alignment with my vision of what I really want. And so create those goals and then really translate them into a concrete action plan that, is habits. And here's the outcome goals that I do quarterly, and then translating, what happens in each quarter out to weeks. And so having those accountability structures for planning is really incredibly important for me. The second is regular reflection. And so making sure, and so I have a process for myself, and then with the clients that I'm working with as well, on a monthly basis, we do a regular reflection. So we look back at what did we say we wanted to do this quarter? Um, are we on track, off track, what, celebrate our wins and then figure out what, if I'm off track, why? Is there some sort of technical error? Was there a limiting belief that's keeping me from moving forward? Or is it truly external circumstances and do I need to give myself some grace? And figure out what the next steps are. So, all of that regular reflection, I think, is really important. And then third is community. And making sure to have the people who can provide the thought partnership and who can help brainstorm solutions and help work through limiting beliefs and be that gentle accountability of saying, if you didn't do the thing, like what was standing in your way and how can we help you remove that barrier? And so for me, what that looks like is I have a sort of business slash life now accountability partner. So a woman who is also a coach, who started her business around the same time as I did back in 2020. And we've been meeting weekly, to talk about business and life, ever since. So for the last 4 years. And then I'm part of a mastermind group with other sort of peer business owners. And we meet every other week to talk through, wins, challenges, progress, questions. And that's incredibly helpful. I think having a community of people who like the thing that you want is just normal makes everything so much easier because you don't have to feel like you're going against the grain.
Well, and that leads me to a question that I was going to ask you before we started to wrap things up on, you mentioned right at the beginning that you're child free by choice, you're a location independent entrepreneur. And I can imagine there would be friends or family in your life who just do not get it. They do not get how you make money. They do not get why you don't have a secure job. They do not get how you can take time off and not be broke. They do not get why you would not want children. How did you find navigating that? Because I think that's something again that when things are going good, it's really easy to stick to it. When things aren't going good, like let's say if somebody's in a down part of their business or they're just really lost with their career, it can be hard to stick up to those people when things aren't so good, right? Like when they're like, so how do you make money? And they're not really making money, or how is this going to work for you when things aren't really working? Like, I'm just curious, what do you do to
Mhm.
stay in alignment? Because those are some big, again, I want to say unconventional. I feel like nowadays I surround myself with people who, again, that would be normal, but there's
Mhm.
going to be people who would still consider being an entrepreneur, working for yourself, and being child free unconventional. So how did you push against that kind of stuff and the pressures from that?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think I've always been a little bit of a rebel, and so just sort of like march to the beat of my own drum. Um, but there certainly are people in our lives who don't understand and don't get it, or who I would say maybe even more so than the people who are like, how do you make money? It's more that if I'm experiencing a challenge, they're like, oh, I wish that was my worst challenge. Right. And so one thing that I've learned from that is one, it's really important to build a community with like-minded people who do understand. Um, and to realize that I don't need to like go to everyone who I know for support. Like I can choose and I can be picky over I'm having a challenge. Like who am I actually going to go to for that support? And if it's somebody who I suspect isn't going to understand, I'm probably not going to go to them. I'm gonna pick and choose who the people are that I'm actually going to go to for support. And and it doesn't mean I don't want to continue building relationships with those family or friends who don't seem to get it. But I feel like one boundary that I've learned over the last few years is for people who really get me, like I am willing to share my wounds. Like I will, as they're happening, like this is an open wound that is actively hurting at this moment. And I'm going to go to those people for support. For people who aren't like-minded or who don't understand, it's not that I'm not going to share any of those things, but it's that I'm going to wait until they start to heal over. Like I'm going to wait until it's a scar and then I'll let them in on it so that something that they say isn't going to make it worse. Um,
Smart.
yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that that's really great advice. So, Jessica, that was so good. I'm so glad that you got to share that. And, someone out there is absolutely going to be relating to this and thinking, wow, maybe I need to take on this journey too. So, uh, finally, where can people connect with you? Where can people find you if they want to hear more about the Fioneers or you and your journey? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so they can find us on our website, which is thefioneers.com. or our YouTube channel, which is at Fioneers. And then can also find us on Instagram or Threads at the Fioneers as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. Any parting words or final advice before we finish up today?
Yeah, I think so. The thing that I always end the YouTube videos with that I do is just enjoy the journey. And so just remembering that we don't need to focus so hard on getting to the goal that we don't enjoy the journey. We can enjoy the process, and that's part of it. So enjoy the journey, enjoy the process.
Amazing. And for anybody listening, have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and I will see you in the next episode of Burnout to Brilliance.